1,000 years of Wampanoag history, it would change, you know. But I don't really like to use that word enemy, you know, because that's extreme. You know, when you hear about that, you think of wars, you know, and there's no evidence of wars over here. There's no huge defensive structures. There's no castles. There's no big palisade walls. There's no evidence of those things. There's no evidence of war machines like catapults or, you know, big things. Our people were hunters, you know, there's bows and arrows, but no devices of warfare, you know. So our rivalries were more economic, you know. Tribes that were on the East Coast and around this region may contest each other about who's going to get west first, who's going to bring these ocean resources to these people west. And the tribe that went and did that first would probably get, you know, pretty good return in the bartering system. You know, it was mostly like an economical rivalry, you know. So people didn't really die, you know, people wouldn't go over and burn another people's village down. You know, things weren't that extreme. We would actually play, we had a very safe conflict resolution in a form of Asoka Kohiohawk, or a football game. If you look in North America, if you spend any time with these people, the people of North America in these different regions, everybody has a conflict resolution in the form of a ball game. You know, over here we played a ball game that was kind of like a mixture of rugby and soccer rolled into it. You know, it was played with soccer-style goalies, and the game was pretty rough, you know, so people might get their point across, but nobody died, you know. The only rule in the game, like we still play this game today to keep the tradition going, the only rule in the game is no hitting with a closed fist. You know, and the gameplay would kind of be like handball. You guys ever play handball? Mm-hmm. You know, you can't run with it, you have to pass it to a teammate. You know, so you're having guys running at you. You know. So that game was played with nations around here, just like how the Iroquois and the Huron and the folks around the Great Lakes would play lacrosse. You know, to settle conflicts, or, you know, resolve them peacefully around that area. But very similar to how the Aztec people would use the ball game and the pyramids. You know, probably how these nations over here were able to sustain themselves for thousands and thousands of years, because we didn't have these enemies. You know, these people that would try to take over your territory. And if you spend any time with the people all around North America, they have such a tie to the land. That's usually why people get insulted when people talk about migration, you know, and where people came from, and the Bering Strait theory and all that stuff, because people have such a close tie to the land, just like how Adam and Eve had a close tie to the land of their creation. You know, like, this is our Garden of Eden. You know, everybody was happy right where they were. You know, they had everything they needed or ever wanted right where they were. You know, so there wasn't a need to go over and conquer Rhode Island, you know, or force those people out of their territory. You know, but things did get kind of heated about 50 years after the time period that we're displaying to you in this museum. In 1675 was the King Philip's War with the Wampanoag people and a lot of different neighboring tribes. All these neighboring tribes that encompassed all around Massachusetts, where a big invading colonial force was trying to push people out of their homelands. Then we defended it, you know, and that was like the first real big war, you know, that was ever in this continent. It was, in my opinion, the first world war, because you had English and Dutch and Spanish and Portuguese all trying to have a foothold on what they considered a new world. And you had all these nations over here in North America trying to defend it, you know, and a lot of different world nations were involved in that, you know, which was still to this day is the most costliest war in England's history, because they had to ship everything over, and that was expensive back then. You know, so I imagine people that were hunters, you know, horticulturalists, you know, would be very difficult to adapt that kind of lifestyle into defending your homeland. You know, having to do that must have been something new, you know.